In this lesson, we'll be talking about the importance of your prospect's mindset, what they think, how they feel, what their intentions are. You'll see how the history of sales has affected the attitudes of most people towards sales and salespeople, and how you can help your prospects move through their fear and into their comfort zone. Sales and salespeople have a bad reputation, and deservedly so in many instances. The reason for that is that there's an old model of sales that's been used for roughly the last 200 years in this country. Let's talk a little bit about that. The first part of the old model is what I call chit-chat, and it took up about 10% of the sales conversation. It wasn't designed to really get acquainted with the prospect or to find out anything about them or their lives or what they think or what they feel. It was just designed as what used to be called an icebreaker or warm-up. And it was just designed to get the prospect to relax enough that you might be able to sell them something. It went something like this. "Oh, Mrs. Smith, what a nice dress you have. My, what a lovely home you have. Oh, your children are so well behaved. How about them Broncos?" Or whoever the local team was. After the prospect was properly warmed up, the next step in the process was qualifying. In the old days, qualifying meant, does the prospect have enough money to buy what I'm selling, and are they open enough or gullible enough that they might decide to buy it? After the warm-up and the qualifying, the next step in the process was the sales presentation. The old-time sales presentation is what I refer to as the wee-wee syndrome, and it went like this. We've been in business for 35 years, and we have the best products and services on the market today, and we have great customer service, and we have a guarantee, and boy do we have a deal for you. And it was wee all the way home. It wasn't about the prospect, it wasn't about what they wanted, it wasn't about what they needed, it was about the salesperson, the company, and the product or service. And then came the last step in the process, and this was about 40% of the process, and it was called the close. The close was where the salesperson tried to convince and cajole and argue and shame their prospect into purchasing the product or service. And it went something like this. Now, this product replaces 43 other cleaning products in your home, and it works just great. It's really wonderful. You probably want to buy a couple of bottles, don't you? No, I don't think so. Just think about all the money you'd save, though, and how simple it would be. Think about all of the storage space under your sink. You might ought to buy several bottles of this, don't you think? No, I don't think I'm really interested. Listen, I have it on really good authority that this is the last time that the company is going to offer this product at this price. At midnight tonight, the price is going to go up. In fact, it's going to almost double. So you probably should buy, 5 or 6 bottles of this right now while you can still get this price, because it's never going to be offered again at this price. You want to do that, don't you? Well, this went on and on and on until one of two things happened. Either the person got out their checkbook or their wallet and bought the product just to get rid of the salesperson, or they said, "I'm not going to buy this. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Get off of my porch or out of my house, and don't you ever come back." And then they slammed the door. I'm pretty sure that's where the word close actually came from. Now, I have a couple of questions for you about the old model of sales. First of all, have you ever been on the receiving end of a hard sales pitch like the one I just described? Most people, if they're old enough to have bought anything, have experienced that. The second question is this: how did you feel when the salesperson did that to you? Now, you might come up with a whole lot of descriptions like angry and frustrated and mad and outraged. One of the first sales classes that I ever taught when I became a sales coach, I asked that question to the class, and one of my students wrinkled her nose up and said, "Icky." So when I wrote a book about sales, I subtitled it, "Take the Icky and Scary Out of Sales." Because here's the third and most important question I want to ask you. if you didn't like the way that felt, do you think that you sometimes hold back and refrain from saying things that you should say or doing things that you should do when you're selling because you don't want people to perceive you the way that you perceive that salesperson who hard sold you? I think that's very common among salespeople and business owners. In fact, I occasionally catch myself still doing that and holding back just a little bit because I don't want people to think of me the way I think of those salespeople who were icky when they tried to sell to me. Thankfully, there is a new model of sales today, and sales and salespeople are gradually evolving toward this new model of sales. And in the new model, the first step is building rapport. It's almost half of the sales process, the sales conversation. Building rapport is more than just warming up the prospect. It's having a conversation. It's asking good questions about that person, about their life, their family, their business, their recreation, their vacations, what they think, how they feel, and finding common ground, finding things in common. And that process of building rapport is extremely important. In order for people to buy from you, they have to know you, like you, and trust you. And the process of building rapport enables them to do that. Once you've built rapport, the second step in the new model of sales is finding the gap. Now, the gap is simply the distance between where somebody is right now in regard to your product or service and where they would really like to be. Sometimes that gap is small. Sometimes it's huge. Sometimes it's the size of the Royal Gorge that's pictured here on the slide. I recently listened to a webinar, and there was a speaker who described the gap this way, and I love this description. Your prospect is on an island, and it's not a very fun place to be. It's not a good island. There's a piece of land that blocks the sea breezes, and so it's hot. It's hot all the time, and it's humid, and when you're on that island, you perspire, and there's a lot of bugs, and there's alligators that climb up on the shore and try to bite you on the leg, and your prospect doesn't like it on that island, and they'd rather be someplace else, and they know exactly where they'd really like to be. It's another island, and they can see the island from where they are, and that island gets the sea breezes, and it's cool and it's pleasant, and there's shade trees, and there's hammocks that are strung between those shade trees, and people can just lay down in those hammocks and just gently sway back and forth and take a little nap or read a good book, and there's no bugs or alligators at all, and it's a wonderful place, and your prospect wants to be there so bad. Now, there's a problem. In between the two islands, the water is really rough, and your prospect doesn't know how to swim. And even if they could swim, there are sharks out there between the two islands that would eat them up, and you have the boat that can take them from one island to the other. And so you have to find out what the island looks like where your prospect currently resides and what the island looks like where they want to be. You have to find out what the gap is, what's the distance between those two places. And then and only then can you formulate a way for them to get from one place to the other. Well, how do you find out what that gap is and how big it is? There's only one way to do that, and that's to ask lots of questions. There's two reasons to ask lots of questions. First of all, it gives you information about what your prospect's situation is. And secondly, sometimes it helps them get perspective on where they are and where they want to be. Once you've asked really good questions and you have the information and you know what the gap is, the next step in the process is offering a solution. And that solution is simply clearly explaining to your prospect what's in it for them if they take advantage of your product or service. So the next step in the process is helping your prospect find a solution to their problem, or a solution to reaching a goal that they really desire. It's helping them find something that's going to change their lives in a really meaningful way. It's the way for them to get from one island to the other. It's the bridge across the gap. And finally, the step of commitment or commencement. Notice that I didn't use the word close, and there's a reason for that. One of the things that I'll be asking you to do in this series of lessons is to change some of your sales vocabulary, because words mean things. And even if it's just subconscious, whenever you say a word that relates to your sales conversation, it sets up a picture in your subconscious mind. Close is one of the words that I want to suggest that you eliminate from your sales vocabulary. And here's the reason why. In everything except sales, the word close means it's the end. We're finished. We're done. There isn't any more. The door is closed, and you can't come in, especially if I have the door locked. This is a closed meeting. You weren't invited, so you stay away. This business is closed until 10 o'clock. You can't come in here and do business until then. This is a closed person. Unless we get the sunglasses and the look off her face and her arms uncrossed, we're probably not going to do any business here either. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever had the experience of having somebody sell you something and the very next day they went into the witness protection program, never to be heard from again? Maybe you tried to call them or sent them an email and you just never heard from them again. That's very, very common in sales. In fact, there are some companies who actually encourage their salespeople never to contact a prospect again after the sale has been completed, because they're afraid that the prospect might change their mind and undo the sale. You know what's even more common? It's even more common for a prospect to tell a salesperson, no, this isn't a good time to do that, or I don't think I'm going to do that right now, or I can't afford that, and the prospect doesn't buy, and the salesperson says next and goes into the witness protection program, and the prospect never hears from them again. That's extremely short-sighted, because no doesn't necessarily mean never, and that prospect knows a whole bunch of other people that they might be able to refer you to who would be great prospects for your product or service. So don't go into the witness protection program. In the new model of sales, the point in the sales conversation where your prospect tells you, yes, I'm ready to get started, or no, I'm not going to start, that's the point where the relationship really starts. It's not where it stops.